Hi, today I'm going to take this GameBoy Advance SP and turn it into this. I'm going to be carrying out quite a few mods on this system. As you can see, we've got a nice smoked case on this, some nice new buttons, new speaker, an IPS screen and an LED mod, which really does make it, give it some punch and make it look really nice. So taking a look around the system, we've got the modified screen, lovely case, really like that case, it'll come up really well. This is who I got it from, Retro Game Repair Shop. Got all my parts from here, so taking a look round, nothing's changed to the main body of the unit, apart from it's now powered by USB-C. I've changed the battery in there. I could have used the original battery, there's nothing fancy about this battery, it's just a nice higher capacity battery that gives you a little bit more playtime. So without further ado, let's take a look at how I did it. First off, we've got to do the USB-C port mod. I've already desoldered the port, the original port. Just, you don't really want to see me taking this to bits, so I'm just going to clean up the remnants and the old solder there, just to put some nice leaded solder on there. The connection is pretty straightforward. You've just got to align the pins, make sure it's nice and parallel to the edge of the board. There's nothing really complicated about fitting this, so I didn't really want to spend massive amount of time, but I did want to show you obviously some of the prep work and just getting it right, making sure it's nice and parallel, because it's got to sit nicely against the board and will be paralleling with the case design. So just takes a little bit of time just to make sure that it's all aligned up properly, and then very gently introduce some solder and just gently tack the connections just to make sure that everything's aligned perfectly. These things are nice and easy to fit, like I said, the right pain in the arse to take apart, so it's just worth taking the extra little bit of time to get the connections right. Now once you've got it aligned and it's all there, you can then anchor the main body of the PCB against the Game Boy Advance motherboard, and that'll anchor it nicely and keep it nice secure. There we go, there's the finished article. So we'll get this cleaned up so you can see, get a little bit of a better view of it. Nice good chunky connections that can transfer that power nicely into the motherboard, and it brings this into a generation now that it's nice and easy. USB-C is becoming much more easily available, and everybody seems to have the connections for their phones and stuff like that, so it makes sense to convert this over to a standard power supply type. And it is convenient that obviously the system runs at 5 volts, so therefore you can use USB-C and use any particular charger you like, really. We'll get this all cleaned up and then we can move on over to the LED mod. This isn't for everybody. Not everybody likes this. Some people find it distracting. What I'm doing, just finishing touches here, I'm just lining it up in the case to make sure the little printed clear section you get with it just lines up, and I'm just using the old case to do that. So again, moving on to the flex cable. What I've done, I've lined the flex cable up with the motherboard and noted where each via is. So then I've gone and wetted and pre-tinned each via or test pad underneath this cable. So what really then I need to do is just make sure it's permanently lined, and then heat the pad, and the solder underneath that's already pre-tinned will come through and affix the LED mod to the motherboard. Now you need to get this nice and flat because you don't want it moving around or interfering with your button operation. It needs to be nice and square to all of your buttons and make sure everything's all in the right place. So I'm just using a pair of tweezers just to hold the circuit board down just while I tin all those pads up, and then obviously what I'm doing here is just making sure I've got plenty of solder on each test pad, making sure I've got a good firm connection. Another thing really is make sure you inspect your work thoroughly. The last thing you want to do is cause a bridge or something like that, and you put it all back together and the system doesn't work, or worse still, you cause a short or something like that and it blows the motherboard. What I'm doing here is just before I reassemble it, I'm just making sure that it all works. I'm just holding the battery against the connections on the back, and then just watching that all the LEDs are functioning. So that's just a bit of a test before you put it all back together, just so that you know it all works before you get there. Next thing, we need to nick the hinges from the original SP. You can buy the hinges separately. I did buy some Retro 6 hinges, some Prestige hinges for another project I'm doing to do with the SP design. It's not another SP mod, but I'm fitting a Retro Pi into an SP with a motherboard that's quite interesting called the GameBoy, but that's obviously for another video. So what we need to do first is get the panel out so that we can gain access to all of the screws that need to get to the hinges, because they're quite difficult to get out, they're quite stiff to get out, so you've got to be careful that you don't break them, obviously. Now underneath the ribbon cable for the LCD screen there is a screw, which you need the tri-blade screwdriver to disassemble the SP. So I've just managed to, there's that brings up that little bracket there, that little piece, so get that out of the way. And now this exposes the backs of the hinges. Now there's some little clips that you need to bend inwards just to gently release the mechanism. So these little tabs need to be, and then you can get to the centre of it and then just pop the hinge out. So there's one hinge. And basically rinse and repeat on the other side. This hinge is slightly different, so you need to make sure you remember which hinge comes from which side. And this one takes a little bit more force, and you're just trying to be careful and not break the hinges, because at this point I do want to reuse them. But again, if you do break them, they are purchasable. Retro 6 does sell them as a separate item, so I'm sure there's other places that sell them elsewhere in the world. So this one takes a little bit more force just to push that out. There we go, that's that. So you could reuse the buttons and stuff like that, but I decided I wanted to really go to town on this. So like I say, I bought this shell, so we'll get these little plastic end caps. I did forget about it, so I had to take it all to bits again, but these little plastic end caps go on the ends of the hinges to basically put the shell colour onto the hinge as well. A little bit fiddly with my sausage fingers, but there is a little opening that you can slide it onto, and then that completes the hinge. One of the hinges just slides in as is, the other hinge does have to be located, so you just have to be careful. They go in with quite a nice satisfying click, and there you have it, there's the hinges in, so we're moving along quite nicely. What we're now going to do is prep the IPS screen. So what we're going to have to do here is just connect the ribbon to the main PCB. There's nothing really technical about there. I thought it was better to lie the screen down and lay everything flat. So it's just nice and easier to pop that into there and click the bail on there just to hold it in place. Once we've done that, we can turn it over. Just get a feel for where the circuit board's going to sit nice and flat. There's a stage here that I forgot. There is a little fly, I don't know if you noticed, by the side of the main ribbon. There is a little, I don't know if it's a touch sensor, that, but it's not applicable for this model. So I would do that differently, but first and foremost we've got to put this little bit of sponge in. I think it's just to support things, because the LCD doesn't completely cover the whole area of the SP. A little bit of double-sided tape, so we get that off. Gently fold it over and mount the circuitry on the back of the IPS screen. And if you can see just to the left of my left hand thumb there's that little white touch sensitive. I don't know if you can trim that. I didn't see anything in the instructions for what to do with that apart from tuck it underneath the circuit board, so a bit later on that's what I do. But this is the IPS screen in its basic form prep, so we'll get this transferred over into the shell. Satisfying peel, get that popped in. Fits perfectly, so I'm really pleased with that. It's all been very nicely thought out, and the quality of the shell is really nice, so I would recommend purchasing from these guys. I think the quality of the shells is really good. So that's that little flying thing. I'm not sure at this point what to do, whether I can just trim it off or what, but I looked online and what people had done is basically just tucked it underneath the circuitry. So you have to get it put in the case, through the case, you have to do like a double curl on there, and then you can poke the circuitry through there. So it basically allows the ribbon to rotate as you move the hinge the LCD screen backwards and forwards, the IPS screen, sorry, backwards and forwards, and then this little trim goes over just to hold it all in place. So I'm thinking as I go along here, because the instructions aren't particularly brilliant, but that looks pretty good to me. And I'm still trying to decide what I'm going to do with this little plastic thing. So here is me just relifting the circuit board and just gently tucking that little flying touch sensor, is what it appears to be to me. I decided that I'm going to tuck it underneath the actual LCD screen, take the tape off, and then just stick it out the way so it's completely invisible now. So I'm happy with that now, so the outer shell can go on. At this point, I was just going to leave it naked, but on closer inspection, the screen tends to move around and doesn't sit parallel or flat, so they do include this little sponge thing. Now I assume that's what goes on to hold it all in place, but I thought in its naked form it looked pretty naff, so that's why I took the sticker that came with the box for Retro 6. I ended up putting that sticker in there as well, just to give it some bling, if you know what I mean, just to make it look a bit different. So I was quite happy with the way that looked. I could have done something different. I did originally put some sponge in there, some small pieces of sponge just to support the screen, and I didn't like the way it looked. I actually preferred the sponge with the sticker. So that's personal preference. So there we go, that's the screen all in and prepped. So far so good, we're getting all really good. There's the actual, if you notice, there's the couple of bits of sponge that I put in to support everything. I ultimately decided that's not the way I wanted to go with it, so I went back to the sponge and the sticker then. So that's the top half of the shell done. Now we can concentrate on adding the buttons and the membranes and things like that. Just a quick thing, there is, if you want to enable the touch controls and so you can control the IPS panel, you need to just put a little bit of wire onto this little pad that's on the flex cable. Now, to be very careful not to overheat that and melt it. What I didn't realise in the packet was a tiny little piece of wire. I missed it, so I ended up in the video here just putting a little bit of red wire from this, which I was originally going to use, and when I actually fitted it into the case I didn't like the way it looked, and then I actually found the piece of wire that was included in the kit. So I actually, in the later parts of this video, you will see that I've changed this wire to a black wire. But it's a tiny little pad on the ribbon which needs to be affixed to the pad on the LED flex cable. So that's that bit all prepped, so that's ready to go. So what we're going to do now is pop the motherboard in, just gently, just so that we can get that little wire connected over. We'll just get this tinned first. Once we've got this done, then just on the base of that ribbon cable, I'll zoom in a bit further, but just on the base of that ribbon cable there is a little test pad looking device just there that we need to affix that wire to, and that gives us the controls then for the LCD, the IPS screen. So I did change this wire, like I say, it's a bit fiddly. Nothing too, as long as you take your time and don't put too much heat in, these flex cables are all okay. So that's that all done. I'm happy with that so far, but like I said, I did change that. I did buy metal buttons and things for this. Don't know why, I just decided to go with something a little bit different. I could have used, this kit does come with all the plastic buttons and stuff like that, but I just wanted something that just to stand out and feel a little bit different to touch, and didn't have quite so much flex in as well. So all of these they appear to be like a cast, which is something a little bit different. Nice and strong and hard wearing. I'll pop all these on. Once these are all fitted, then we can get the membranes in, and then really the speaker, and then we're off to the races with popping the motherboard in, and then we're starting to get pretty much through it. These buttons are foolproof, they're all keyed so that you can't get it wrong. The quality of them, again, I'm really impressed with. Everything so far has been really good quality. Do make sure you put the speaker in the right way around. I have managed to get the speakers in the wrong way around before and ended up having to take it all to bits again. It can go in both way rounds, but obviously the terminals have to face you, so they connect then with the motherboard when you pop it in. I did later on change these membranes for clear membranes. I did go back in and change those, purely and simply because it's a clear case. It didn't look bad, but I decided that the clear buttons just let the LEDs stand out a little bit more, so I'm really pleased with that. Just getting rid of any fingerprints that I've left, which is normal for me, being a mechanic or a technician, whatever you want to call it. I do have sausage fingers and I do tend to get mucky fingerprints on things. Lost the button there. We'll get that popped in. Again, my fingers aren't really made for little things like this, but there you go. With a quick tidy up, make sure we've got no dust, because obviously being a clear case, these things now matter. Okay, with all that done, then this is quite a fiddly bit. I decided to use a different type of tweezers. The tweezers didn't really help in this instance because you're trying to go in at an angle, so it was quite fiddly, I did find, but I've got the hang of it. The more I did it, so like I say, I did take this to bits again and again, because I had to put new buttons onto the motherboard. One of the buttons was not working very well, which surprised me really, but it's the normal eBay purchase. The shell I did the original motherboard, sorry, and the original shell I did purchase from eBay, and unfortunately it was sold as working, but as per usual with eBay, it didn't. The left pad button and the down arrow on the D-pad didn't work, so I had to. Luckily, I'd bought some those little micro switches for the motherboard I'd bought for another project, so I'd got some spares, so I managed to get those things all sorted and working lovely. So just deciding the best way, because it's a clear case, everything's visible, so you've got to be really careful how you arrange things, because you want to make sure it looks nice from the other side. This is just a little trim that goes around the USB-C port to obviously mimic then the size of the original charge port, and I think that fits in absolutely perfectly. Right, we'll just get some screws in there. You'll notice that the shoulder buttons are also a different colour. I couldn't find them in the kit. I don't know if I lost them or whether they weren't supplied. More than likely I'd taken them out of the box and lost them, so I had to order some more. I purchased those from Retro 6, weren't very expensive. There's the replacement battery. Just make sure the orientation of the battery is really good. That's the volume, everything working there. So far so good. I did go back in and make quite a few changes. Like I say, I changed the sponge, I changed the buttons underneath, but you must admit this is really nice, really turned out really well. The SP wasn't something I played a massive amount on, but with that new modified screen, I know it really works fantastically. This is just some of the options you can have with the screen. You can decide the brightness, which is obviously up to 8, I think. Different colour palettes, not sure why you'd want them, but hey ho. Digital signal processing, so you've got other modes there. The FRM, I believe, is for anti-flicker. The way the system works, transparencies were done differently, so therefore this function stops transparencies looking horrible. It works with them. It's used to work with a modern IPS screen, so that works really well. You control that by pressing the two A and B buttons. You can control that there. The LEDs, the actual LEDs on the board, you can change the way they pulse, the way the colours and stuff like that. So it's a really fully featured, quite nice build really. I'm really pleased with it. So there we go. That's the Game Boy Advance SP that's been modded. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next video. Bye for now.